Police have identified the gunman as Michael Lewis. They say they found a note in his pocket after he killed himself that indicated he was upset about the pain that he was still in 2 weeks after having surgery. Now, one of the victims, Dr. Preston Phillips, was apparently his surgeon, and Lewis apparently blamed him for the pain that he was still suffering and not doing more to ease that pain. Police say that Lewis bought one of his two guns last month, or it's actually a few days ago, and the other just yesterday, hours before the shooting. They say he also killed the receptionist, another doctor, and a patient who was in an exam room.
Officers continued to search the building for victims or additional suspects and came across another victim that was down in an open area near a nurse's station. At this point, officers began directing first responders, IMSA and fire to those victims to render first aid. Again, this is something that we work cooperatively with, and we can go into what we call a hot environment with medical personnel and fire personnel and start rendering aid. In that same room there was the victim was at, officers also rescued an elderly female that was in the room.
Police say they found dozens of casings from both his handgun and rifle. Officers remained on the scene until 3 this morning before finally releasing it back to St. Francis. Police say that they found dozens of casings there, as I mentioned. Now, Arshay Smith was one of the first reporters on scene right after police received that 911 call. She was at today's news conference and has more now on the police response to the shooting. Shay.
The police's quick response to the shooting was a key point in today's press conference because between that initial 911 call about the active shooter situation all the way up until police found the victims and the suspect, only about 6 minutes had passed.
I cannot begin to thank the men and women of the Tulsa Police Department for the immediate response that they had to the incident yesterday.
Tulsa Police Chief Wendell Franklin says at 4:52 the initial call came in from a third party who was on a video chat with someone at the medical building.
At 4:53 p.m., we received a 911 call about a shooter in a building. We then continued to receive multiple calls that were more specific on a shooter being on the second floor of the Natalie building.
At 4:56, the first group of Tulsa police officers arrived on scene. At 4:58, TPD says they heard one last gunshot, which they believe was the suspect taking his own life. Multiple Oklahoma law enforcement agencies responded to the shooting within minutes.
It was Tulsa Police, Tulsa Fire, Tulsa County Sheriff, FBI, ATF, Light Horse Police. I mean, I could go on and on. There were so many people, which really just tells you we have a lot of great people in this community that want to help.
Today, the mayor thanking the first responders who ran into the building to try and save others.
I spoke with an officer yesterday who's a seasoned veteran of the department, and he was one of the first people to get here. And he said, "Mayor, it was like the beaches of Normandy out there. Everywhere I looked, to my left and my right, there were officers running towards that building, jumping over bushes, getting around anything in their way between them and that threat so that they could save people." That is the law enforcement community that we have here.
Chief Franklin says his officers go through thorough training for not if, but when an incident like this happens. And on June 1st, it happened.
Because we have seen the violence that has taken place throughout the United States, and we would be naive not to think that that would not happen in our jurisdiction.
29 police cadets went through active shooter training just about a week ago this past Friday, and a lieutenant tells me that during that training, they're taught to go into the situation without hesitation, without questions. They're taught to go straight in, and a captain told me that once those officers enter the field, they do come back to that active shooter training every few years to make sure that they are refreshed. Live in Tulsa, Shay Smith, 2 News Oklahoma.